Thank you for being here. A continuation of our time last week talking about grief and loss. And last week we covered the myths and misconceptions and what grief really is. This week we're going to talk about how to care for ourselves and how to care for those that we know and love that are experiencing grief. How do we walk with them? I wanted to share this. And you can come and look at it closer if you want. I was walking out of my house and going, oh my gosh, this probably speaks to what we're talking about today. Have you ever heard the poem Footprints in the Sand? Is anybody familiar with that? And so I made this a while back, and I'm giving it to a mother of a friend of mine, and I saw it sitting there waiting to be gift wrapped, and I go, oh, I'm going to bring it this morning. So Footprints in the Sand is one night I dreamed I was walking along the beach with the Lord. Many scenes from my life flashed across the sky. In each scene, I noticed footprints in the sand. Sometimes there were 2 sets of footprints, other times there was only one. This bothered me because I noticed that during the lowest parts of my life, when I was suffering from anguish, sorrow, or defeat, I could see only one set of footprints. So I said to the Lord, "You promised me, Lord, that if I followed you, you would walk with me always. But I have noticed that during the most trying periods of my life, there has been only one set of footprints in the sand. Why, when I needed you most, have you not been there for me?" The Lord replied, "The years when you have seen only one set of footprints, my child, is when I carried you." And that is what we must remember through grief. While we might feel very alone, God is never far away. Sometimes it feels that way, but God is right there. So just a quick review from last week. Where's my review from last week? That grief is not a problem to be solved. We don't need to be fixed. We don't need to offer solutions to other people. That's not what it's about. There's no timeline for grief. There's no end date. There are no stages of grief. It's not a linear process. Everyone's experience of loss is different for a multitude of reasons. People in grief need support, but it's very hard to find. So if you can be that support, it would be awesome. There are many complex emotions of grief that emerge in no organized way and without any particular triggers. Anger, sadness, guilt, regret, sometimes peace, a ton of emotions. People experience them, many in one day, all over the place, up and down, and it goes on for a long time. So how do we care for ourselves and for others? One important point is that people who are grieving in our culture, many do not know how to grieve. So it's important if we know how to help somebody who's grieving, it might help them with that process. Our culture has been so stifling of the grief and bereavement and mourning that people are afraid to express it, are sometimes ashamed to express it, are just very inhibited about expressing it. So first, a few myths associated with grief, just to get this out of the way. There's a myth that grieving people need a year to heal. Baloney. There's no timeline. We have no idea how long it takes for any individual person. It could take a year, it could take 10 years. Who knows? It's not our problem. We are here to support, no matter how long it takes. Another myth, grieving people need you most in the first few weeks. I will tell you, as a person who has gone through loss, that there are plenty of folks close by for the first few weeks and then they disappeared. I didn't stop grieving. I didn't stop needing support. But most folks disappear at that point. They go back to their lane, go back to life as business as usual. So there's also some studies that have been done that suggest that more support is even needed in the second year after a significant loss. The grief changes, but it needs even more support than the first year. So just keep that in your brain. It doesn't go away. Another myth, grieving people should bury their dead and move on. Get over it. Doesn't happen. Another myth, you should not speak of the dead. Oh, that was big in my family. Don't mention their names because it might trigger a response. It might make you cry. I don't want to suggest anything. I don't want to bring them up. I don't want to share memories. No, say their name. Say it often. Tell stories. Share your memories. If you reflect on the loss over a long period of time, you are stuck. No. I mean, there are people who have experiences that they call sometimes complicated grief that may need some additional help, but generally speaking, no, you don't get stuck. It's just how you are grieving, and maybe you need more support to help you work through some of those emotions. We talked about grief is not a linear process. So do not mention, oh, you're going through the stage of denial right now. No, they're not. No. There's no such thing. Those stages, remember, were Kubler-Ross's book associated with death and dying. Whole different process of how people approach death. Grieving, no stages. All those emotions, but not in any organized, orderly fashion. And another myth is that those in grief should seek professional help. I think I told the story last week of a friend of mine who many people in her circle told her very quickly after her husband died, very suddenly and tragically, that she needed professional help because she was acting so strange. Only to find out, no, that's not what she needed. She just needed to grieve, and she needed to support, and she needed somebody to tell her she wasn't going crazy. She was so relieved to hear that. So the realities of grief, for those who are grieving and those who are supporting people in grief, is you will feel. So if you are not a person who is accustomed to intense emotions, fasten your seatbelt. Grief is messy and you will feel. In fact, you must feel. You must lean into the grief. You must almost embrace it, because that's the only way to truly understand and appreciate the loss experience. So lean into it. Another reality of people who are grieving, your tolerances will be short. Your tolerances for chatter. Your tolerance for people telling you the business of their day. Your tolerance for multitude of activities and scheduling and planning. No. And you will feel guilty because you can't talk to your mother anymore because she keeps bringing up all of her stories. Or you can't handle all the kids running around over here. That's going to happen. Give yourself some grace. Recognize in another person, if you are with them, they don't want to hear the little intricacies of your day. They're not listening. They can't hear it. It's just chatter. Your tolerance for socializing will be limited. So plan ahead. Drive yourself so you can escape when you need to. Don't go with another person, especially the one who has a tendency to stay to clean up, because you're not going to be able to stay that long. Trust me. Always have your escape hatch. A friend of mine had, who lost her husband, was involved with a wonderful faith community, and still is. And the people in her faith community thought they were helping her by including her into these various groups. I think you need to be on this committee. I think you need to be on the governance board. I think, don't you want to be involved in this and this? And she was the kind of person who couldn't say no. So she committed, and she came to me in tears, saying, I don't know how to get out of this. I just signed up for all these things, and I don't want to do them. I can't. People who are in grief have low energy reserves. And people who are grieving need to give themselves some grace, that is the reality. And people who are supporting those people in grief need to respect that. And in fact, remind them and be sensitive to that. I'm inviting you along only because I don't want to exclude you, but I know you may not be ready for this. So you're not excluding, but you're making sure they understand that it's okay for them to say no. So it's okay to be selfish. When you are in grief, I always say, play the grief card. No, can't do it. No, it's okay. It's okay to beg out of groups. It's okay to stay home. It's okay to say, not today. And as the author Megan Devine titled her book, it's okay to be not okay. You will be not okay for as long as it takes, and that's okay. Let the tears flow. That's hard for some folks. It was hard for my sister. She isolated herself because she said she was afraid she would start crying if she went out in public. Well, for heaven's sakes. I learned to talk through the tears, and people would say, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, no, don't, keep going. I'm just going to cry for a while. Just keep going. The tears come. There is a sacredness in tears. There is a healing in tears. Don't be ashamed of tears. It makes other people uncomfortable. That's their problem. Your problem is to give yourself some grace. If tears come, let them come. And if you need to educate other people, which shouldn't be your job or your role, but as I said to people, ignore my tears, just keep going. And most people figured that out, they did. I will repeat this again. Know that God walks with you every step of this journey. Spend time, give yourself time to be with God. Find some time for stillness. Find some time for quiet. Consider some reflective and restorative practices. I'm going to list some which may speak to you. Some of them may be new. Some of them you may say, oh, I should get back to that. Yoga. Oh, so healing for me. Sometimes. I was already practicing yoga, but I stayed away for a while. And when I went back to it, the first session I went back to, I just laid on my mat. I didn't move. The yoga instructor knew my experience, and she just gave me space. I just needed to be with my mat in this room of these wonderful, supportive people. Meditation, wonderful healing practice. Journaling, I will say it again, journaling. People hate it, but journaling. Writing is therapeutic. You don't need to be a published author. You can make lists. You can make bullet points. You can write letters to the person who died. You can say what's good about it, what's bad about it. You can write about your day. You can write about your feelings. You can write about the last conversation you had on the telephone that made you cranky. Doesn't matter. It's your journal. And it's a wonderful, wonderful healing practice. People find it, I don't know, they struggle with it for some reason. But everyone I have talked to who has attempted it, continued it. It doesn't have to be every day, but there needs to be a little bit of a discipline involved in it, and it really is a helpful practice. I enjoyed sound therapy, if you can find groups that do that. It's hard to explain it until you experience it. but it's a wonderful, resonating experience. Exercise, especially those that bring you some peace, like walking or swimming. A friend of mine is a swimmer, and he finds swimming to be very meditative for him. I would not, but that's his experience. Make time for yourself. Definitely make time for yourself. Part of the complication of grief for some folks is that they all have many other responsibilities in their life. That life doesn't stop because you lost somebody. You still have kids, you still have parents, you still have a job, you still have other things going on in your life that you can't stop. So it's even more important when that is your life experience to create some space just for you. You have to manage your grief yourself. Nobody's going to do it for you. So make that space. And make sure other people respect it. We've heard of mothers who lock themselves in the bathroom just so they have time away from their kids, which I think is hysterical. Sean, do you have that experience, Sean?
Not yet.
Prayer. Let me say that one again, prayer. Journaling can be prayer. That is, meditation can be prayer. It is the way to reconnect, the way to connect, and the way to be, to give yourself that inner space that is so important in grief. Quiet music sometimes is very helpful for some folks. Maybe a different kind of music than what you're used to listening to, something that will bring you some peace. Are there other restorative practices that you think of that might be helpful to you or to someone you know and love? Crafts. I locked myself in my sewing room, absolutely. Another friend of mine was a baker. She liked to bake. She just kept giving me bread. Lots of healing practices in crafts. Knitting is another one, because you can there's sometimes you can be mindless in your knitting, and you can just sit and just knit. I used to be able to knit in the dark. I mean, it can be addictive. What else? What are some other healing practices you can think of? There's retail therapy, yeah.
Yeah, retail therapy, I do that.
Yeah.
But I was thinking there are things that happen that can really be such a comfort when you're grieving, and it has to do with pets.
Mm-hmm.
When my husband passed away, it's been 9 years now, we had a mature female kitty named Prissy, and that was his kitty. She wouldn't let me touch her. He was her person. And we had a younger kitty, Chester. And after my husband died, it took Prissy a while to decide I was going to be her human. But what amazes me is on the 1-year anniversary.
You're fine. It's okay. Talk through the tears. Let them go.
On the 1-year anniversary. I can't believe I'm getting so emotional today, but anyway, my kitties were never bed kitties. They, slept elsewhere. And I had gone all day and felt like I did really well. I was being strong. And I went to bed. And my kitties, one was on each side of me. And I felt like they felt it from me, but they also knew he was, gone, never to come back. But it was very comforting.
And you felt some of his presence in them too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, pets. Well, tell me your name.
Gail.
Gail. Gail is sharing, for those who maybe couldn't hear, how pets are so important in our healing process. If you are a pet lover, if you had pets, if your loved one had pets, and you now have become the caregiver for those pets, it is a significant part of your grief journey. They will be with you, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was a beautiful story. Thank you. My husband had a hunting dog. That was his hunting dog. She tolerated me because she knew sometimes I fed her and sometimes I took her running with me, but it was his dog. And we had to deal with her grief as well as my own after he died. It was really a fascinating experience. What else? Any other healing practices you can think of? Reading. It's hard to read though. Most people I know who are grieving, they struggle with reading, but poetry. There are many wonderful books out there that have some great short blessings and verses. John O'Donohue is one author. Jan Richardson is another one who just writes some beautiful poetry and blessings that are just for grief. Yeah, Gail?
Donna Ashcroft, I think is her name.
Donna Ashcroft?
Yes, she's written some beautiful stuff.
So stick to that kind of stuff, and it can be, again, it's meditative. Read one and just sit with it for a while. And sometimes they're very validating as well. So, the needs of mourning for people who are grieving, and also for those of us who are supporting others. People who are grieving need to be open to the presence of their loss. We can't ignore it. You can't hide it. The first time I had to check the box that said widow was whoa. That was a huge experience. But yes, be open to the presence of your loss. Let yourself feel the pain of that loss. It's hard for many folks. I had a gentleman in a group that I ran a while back who was like an outlier. I had these people who were kind of all congealing together because they were grieving and they were sharing their experiences of grief, and he was saying the opposite. He was buying into all the platitudes. He was buying into the get over it. He was buying into the you just need to stifle it because people don't like being around you when you're sad and depressed. And the group was so wonderful in supporting him because they knew that he wasn't acknowledging his loss. He wasn't accepting the emotions that were there. They will come, and they won't be pretty. And the group was saying, we will still be here for you. So people, again, that's a perfect example of people who don't know how to grieve in our culture because of the way we've been conditioned. Remember the person who died. You might have to educate your family. You might have to educate other people who are around you. You will say their name. You will talk about your experiences and your memories. I remember that last Christmas when, I remember that vacation when. Say their name. I guarantee you will notice somebody in the room who will go, a little cringeworthy. Yes, Allie?
One of the hardest things for me when after my husband died, I came here, and it was so hard to make new friends, not know anyone, and no one knew my husband. So one of the things that help in grief is to be able to say, you know what, Rich was so great at this, or he really enjoyed that. Well, I remember having a meal down in Lauder Hall one of the first times, and I was speaking with Sumana, and she said, oh, I'm a member of the same club. And I said, oh. She said, and I started talking about my husband, and she said, well, is he here? You know, they didn't have a clue.
Right.
And it's okay, it's something you've got to, but that was hard. And to make new friends.
And thank you, Sally, for bringing that up, because that is the experience of so many. While some people can lose a person and they're surrounded by others, maybe children, maybe other family members who have known this person. Like when my brother-in-law died, my brother-in-law's been in my life since I was 9 years old. I mean, so my sister had a ton of people around her that knew him and knew him very well. They were involved in church. All their church folks knew him. When my husband died, I had just retired, so I hadn't created my new social group yet. He had his very decided activities that were different from mine, so the groups that I was doing these kind of things, and he was going off in his hunting clubs and his shooting clubs, and there weren't too many people in my world who knew him, and it was very hard re-entering and reintroducing. And I remember one time I wrote in my journal, I am getting so tired of being the new person, and I am getting so tired of having to tell my story. Yeah, it's very, very hard, right?
But I just stopped mentioning him because it didn't really matter to them. It's okay.
Yeah.
But that was not easy.
It was not. It's not easy, right? Right. So that kind of weaves right into the next point, is that after we have lost somebody, especially somebody who was very present in our lives, we have to create a new identity for ourselves. We don't go back to the way it was. I don't go back to buying Cheerios at the grocery store because I don't eat them. That's a very simple example. You're no longer a caregiver. You are no longer a wife. You are no longer a child of your parent when your parent dies, and you have to create this new sense of being in the world without that person present. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without a lot of pain and struggle. Creating a new identity is probably the hardest part of grief, and the one that is never talked about. Who am I if I'm no longer a sibling? How do I relate to the world when this person who was very much a part of me is no longer there? So recognize that the people in your life who have lost somebody are going through that struggle. And make sure you are present as their anchor. Even though you are no longer a wife, you are still my friend. Even though you are no longer a child, your parent died, you are still my sister. Hang in there with them as they go through that journey. That often is year 2 of grief. So be present as you need to be. Searching for new meaning, and when I say that, I'm not talking about searching for meaning in the death of the person, because that's another platitude that we don't want to hear. But what is my purpose, right? How is God calling me now to be in this world? What is my next thing? That's part of it too. Hard, very hard. Understanding the many emotions and behaviors associated with grief and loss that you will express and experience, and you will go, oh, I would be getting tired of myself too. Telling your story, retelling your story, it just keeps coming out of your mouth. Being very focused on yourself. It's okay, but some people feel really bad because they're not used to that. Continuing to do things that are unique to being with that person. Continuing to go to the same places, the same stores, buy the same groceries, only to realize I don't like Cheerios. There's mystical experiences that people talk about, and you will go, oh, that can't be true. Honor them, honor them. Mystical experiences happen. People try to find meaning in them, dreams, half awake, half asleep moments. Honor those. It's bringing the person peace. And remember, anniversaries and holidays sometimes do have significant impact. So try to be present for those people, and if you are the one grieving, anticipate that and make some preparations for the day. So it does get better. It is temporary, but life will never go back to the way it was. I want to walk through one of my favorite parts, and some of the folks in my grief groups love this because it brings some humor to the world, but it also, I call it cringeworthy. People say the most cringeworthy things. I will guarantee that as we go through this list, you have said something, well, at least one of these things, if not all of them, at some point or another. I guarantee it. God needed another angel. He or she lived a good, long life. You should be thankful for the time you had. You're young enough to remarry. I heard that one a lot. I had actually people give me dating websites. You're young enough to have more children. It's good that you have 2 other children. It happened for a reason. It's part of God's plan. Be thankful it wasn't worse. He or she is in a better place. I know how you feel. Oh, please erase that one from your speech. Please erase that one. You don't. You can't. I know it was his or her time. All of those statements have the subtext of stop feeling so bad. Get over it. Those are the unspoken words, but that is the subtext. Another huge one that I'm sure someone in this room, if not many, have done, is telling your own story. I know how you feel because when my husband died, here's what I did. What happens when you do that? Where's the attention now? Who is the focus of the story?
But not to that person.
That's right. You've just taken away their time. You've just turned it around to be about you. Let me tell you my story. Sometimes it's even competitive. How my grief was even worse than yours. People will do this. If you are grieving or you have experienced loss, I guarantee people will do this. Who has experienced a loss in here and has had somebody tell their story as part of their offering support? Oh, I was getting a facial. And the esthetician decided it would be helpful for her to tell me her grief story while I was on the table in a moment, in a period where I was trying to relieve my own stress by having this therapeutic thing happen to me, and she was talking about her own experience. I wanted my money back.
How'd you handle that?
I told her to shut up. I said, I will apologize in advance if I sound a little harsh, but please stop talking.
She got it, didn't she?
I'm not sure, because I didn't explain why, because it's not my job to educate people, at least that's what I felt. So I'm not sure that she totally understood why she probably put it back on me, that, I was mentally ill or something. So, yes?
There is a phrase that we usually use in my place, say, God knows all.
God knows all. Say more about that.
So that simply just a part of saying, just move on, because everything that happened had already been known to God.
Right.
So you shouldn't worry about it, you should move on.
So you should get over it. God knows what, yes.
And it was God's will.
Yes.
God's will for the person. If it wasn't God's will, the person wouldn't have gone. I don't know.
God's will. That's another great one. Why did God take that person away from me then? If it was God's will and God's plan, what kind of God is that would hurt me so much? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is our bodies are impermanent. I mean, Paul says that over again. There's an impermanence to our physical form, but there is something else that lives. Yeah, the physical form is taken away from us, and it's not God's doing. It just, with life there's death, right? And with death there is loss. With death there is grief. We are missing the physical presence of that person. And that is what we need to support, to be there. We don't need to blame it on God. Another huge one that happens, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is that we drop away, ignoring the person. Oh, if I call them, they're just going to tell me their story again. Oh, I'm not ready for that today. Hard as it is, we need to be present. And if the only thing you can do is be present, you are doing the best thing you can do. No words. No words. Just be present. So what can you say? What can you do? I'm so sorry. Full stop. No more words. I'm so sorry. There's nothing else you can say after that that would be better. And most people keep going, and then they dig themselves in that hole, okay? You can say, there are no words, because there aren't. Ask them if they want to talk about it. Only if you are ready to listen. One point on that. Don't ask them, how did it happen? They may not be ready to talk to you about those details, and you may not be in a relationship with that person where that's any of your business. You may think that you're bringing them comfort by helping them share it. No, you ask them, do you want to talk about it? I can be there for you if you do. But if they don't want to talk about it, don't enter that space where you're pressuring them to tell you the details. And I'm sure we've all done this, right? You don't have to acknowledge it, but I know we have. You can say, he or she was so loved, and I'm going to miss them too. You can tell them it's okay that you're not okay. You can acknowledge their grief by saying, this has to be so hard for you. Full stop. No more words. Because then they will have an opportunity to share, and they know you might be a safe audience. Depending on your relationship with the person, you might offer some specific help, but only if you know that person well enough to know what they might need and to not be intrusive. Like accompanying them to activities. Would you like me to drive you to your doctor's appointment? I know it's an important one, and I'd be happy to go with you. Would you like me to come over and just sit with you some evening? We can watch a movie. Be present and available without being intrusive. Don't bring casseroles. I cannot tell you how many people who have lost a loved one, I can't tell you how many casseroles they have thrown away. It's not that your food isn't lovely, but we don't want to eat. It's the last thing we're thinking about right now. Know that the griever has needs well beyond a few weeks, a few months, and maybe even a few years. Often there's more help needed in year 2. Just checking, especially anniversaries or holidays. If you offer to help, follow through. But do not say, call me if you need something. Because now that puts the burden on them. I'm not going to do that. But if you offer something specific, I can take you to the doctor, for example. I can drive for you. I can go pick up lunch. You want me to bring it over? Something very specific. You might hear, that would be so nice. Don't stop calling. Don't stop texting. Don't stop checking in. I had a very dear friend who, the day after my husband died, started texting me every single morning. Every single morning I received a text from him. Sometimes it was, how you doing? Sometimes it was, let me tell you about my day yesterday. Sometimes it was something more substantive, but every single day, for a year and a half, he sent me a text. It was so awesome. I looked forward to that every morning. Remember that large events, commitments, not enjoyable. So plan for more intimate gatherings. I'm getting together with a couple of our friends, too, and name them. Would you like to join us? It's just for a cup of coffee. No long time. Keep the pressure off. Don't invite them to the annual family reunion Christmas gathering. They're probably not ready for that. Wow, look at that. It's new. Those are my lists of ways to offer care to people who are grieving. Also, just remember that if you are grieving, you may not know how to do it, and please, please, please take care of yourself. It's okay to be selfish. It's okay to focus on yourself. And always remember, there are people out there who want to support you, but they may not know how. Ask for what you need. Very important. Any questions? Comments? Yes?
It's kind of very revealing to me. Now I know the greatest mistake that I have been making.
It's okay for confessions. It's okay.
Telling my stories.
Telling your stories.
Yeah, I said, I'm sorry for your loss. Then I would talk about if it was the person's father, then I would change to talk about the loss of my father.
Yep.
I was thinking that would be a kind of comfort for the person that is going through the loss. That, oh, this is a friend here. He lost his father. Now he is talking to me. So he had the same experience that I'm having now. I thought that was going to be a comfort to that person.
You think it's a way to talk about relatability, right? I lost my father too.
Yeah.
So now I can relate to you. But what we learned, remember from last week, is that grief experience is nothing like your grief experience. So even though you lost your father, it's not the same as this person losing their father, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that because I lost my father, and then somebody just said, welcome to the club.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Welcome to the club. And then another one was congratulations. Like, kind of like took it a different way, congratulating me for what? For my father. But in other sense, maybe the person meant congratulations for living to bury your father. But
It was a little too soon for that kind of humor, right? Yeah. They were trying to be probably a little humorous and light in offering their support, but that probably was a little too soon, right? Yeah. Yeah. A very dear friend and I both lost our husbands around the same time, and we talk, just two of us, about the Widows Club, and talk about, oh, we have another member. We would never tell that person that we have just admitted them to our Widows Club. It's a little too soon, right? Yeah, yeah. Very good, though. Yeah, when you tell another person, I know what you're going through because I just lost my whoever, you have now turned the attention to your story and taken it off them. So even if you thought it was a point of trying to be relatable, it's not working. I'm sorry, full stop. Best thing you can do. And if you know the person really well, you can ask, do you want a hug? But only if that is your relationship. Okay. Don't be intrusive and hug everybody just because they're grieving. That's very intrusive. Oh my gosh, I had men in the church I was going to who just took it as an opportunity to touch me. And it was like, oh my gosh, it was so creepy. I had to stop going to that church. It was so freaking creepy. Oh. So yes, don't touch people just because it's an opportunity. Any other questions or comments? So is this helpful? Do you think you're going to respond differently now to people who are grieving?
Yeah.
Good, good.
Very helpful.
Good. I also offer a 5 to 6 week course called Healthy Grief for people who are fairly new in the grief experience, like 3 to 6 months-ish, to help people learn how to grieve better and to validate their experiences. I find that most people in that group have many aha moments because they had no idea what they are going through was so messy, and it's okay to be messy. Thank you all for coming. It was a pleasure. Yes, Allie? See ya. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.